Well, I want to thank you all for joining us on what is an historic day for our country as a $2 trillion plus stimulus package was approved by the House, and at any moment the president is expected to sign it into law. This is something that impacts everybody, and particularly the businesses that depend on us at the Home Furnishings Association. So I just want to let you know off the bat here, you have the ability, if you are logged into the webinar, to present questions. You'll see that on the box. I believe it'll be to your right. So please send us questions. We'll get to as many as we can. Those that we don't get to, we will include on an FAQ portion of our special web page, which is myhfa.org/COVID-19. Also, when this is over with, we will have this recorded for this hour, and that will also be put up for people that you know who will not have a chance to see it live as we do right now. But I don't want to waste any more time here. I want to get right to it. We have joining us, we have Doug Clark. Doug is the government relations lead for us here at the Home Furnishings Association. And we also have our Washington lobbyist, Chris Andresen here. There has been so much traffic going on between so many entities this day. Chris, I'm going to start with you. And I know we're going to have a lot to deal with here, but can you just give us take the temperature right at the moment of what we're seeing there on in Washington and these wheels that have been put in motion?
Yeah, Mark, thank you very much, and appreciate everybody who joined. It's been a hectic week, and that's not to downplay, especially what's happening across the country, not only to your businesses, but to folks on a personal level too. So that was not lost on Congress here as they acted with a special urgency. Just on this, I was reflecting today, in 3 weeks time, Congress has passed 3 significant bills related to this crisis, and I think we're all expecting another one to come later and sometime in April or May, looking ahead. So it really was kind of a crazy. I know we were passing along various versions of the Senate bill as it was drafted. It came together relatively quickly when you think of the numbers, $2 trillion plus done in the course of a week. And there's several key elements we're going to go over at a high level. You know, what's in the bill for your respective businesses, for your employees, knowing that you are facing tough decisions. In some cases, you've made tough decisions. What does that mean now that this bill is passed? And looking ahead, I know that in speaking to several staff and members today, the Senate is not coming back to DC for 3 weeks. The House has adjourned as well, and we're not expecting them back either. They're going to be hearing about the pain on the business side that you're feeling, that you're on a personal and business level. So I think that's going to drive some urgency for some more effect. So as we go through here, and you have ideas of how this may impact your specific business or the industry writ large, let us know, and we can continue to push for changes and things to be made to help your businesses survive and your employees remain employed. Just at the outset, for some businesses, for employees, there's a direct rebate activity here, direct from the Department of Treasury. So you've heard a lot about this. These are these direct checks, $1,200 per individual, $2,400 per couple, and then $500 additional per child under 17 years old. What I'll say to that is there is an income level phase out to that. So it phases out as $75,000 annually for an individual taxpayer, $150,000 for joint filers, and the complete phase out is at $98,000 for individuals or $99,000 for individuals, $198,000 for couples. So that's direct cash into the economy, into taxpayers' pockets. It's going to be paid out in about 3 weeks. I saw an estimate on that costs a little shy of $300 billion. So those will be going out. On the business side, specifically, there's been a new small business administration overseen loan program created called the Paycheck Protection Program. And a lot of the programs we'll be talking about today, and certainly interested in your questions, the incentive here is for you to keep your employees retained, keep them on the payroll. And that's where the greatest incentive is going to be for your respective businesses moving forward. For this particular program, there's a few elements I'll go over briefly at a high level. First, that Paycheck Protection Program, which I'll dive a little bit more deeply into, $350 billion has been appropriated. Secretary Mnuchin has said that his expectation is that's going to be up and running by next week. They have, in the law, they have 15 days. Obviously, the administration is expediting a lot of these various regulations and guidance, so they're expecting to get that stood up quickly. There's another element. There's an existing loan program at SBA called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. That gets a $10 billion infusion in this bill. And then there's a separate element that was added. One of the last versions of the Senate bill we saw, it's cost $17 billion. Anybody with an existing SBA loan would be granted payment deferral for 6 to 12 months. So that's anybody on this call, any of your peers that has an existing loan element. So going into the $350 billion pool, the key element here is that a few things. Under 500 employees. One piece that we followed very closely was there's an exception for companies with more than one location. However, under 500 employees at each location. That is specific only to particular industries, notably hotels and restaurants. I will say that I've got questions from several industries, including this one, about possibility of applying that administratively to different industries. I've heard from folks today on the Hill that that's not an option, although it's something that we could explore in a fourth package potentially. So that basically for this industry, just know it's the cutoff is 500 employees or less. The real kicker here is that there's a significant element that's eligible for loan forgiveness. So it's a loan that essentially could turn into a grant, and that's the eligible costs for that are up to 8 weeks of payroll, mortgage interest payments, rent payments, and utility payments. This is all done through. It's going to be an add-on to an existing SBA loan application process, which is done through private lenders. The cap, I mentioned one of the other existing loan program at SBA has a cap of $2 million. This program, there's several steps to it, the highest being 10 million, so it's a much higher cap. However, typically it's going to be at 2.5 times your regular payroll as where your cap goes for that element, and then factoring in those other costs. But that's a one thing that that loan forgiveness aspect is going to make this extremely popular. One of the other aspects to this too is you could right now apply to these existing SBA loan programs, and that application under this law can be refinanced into this Paycheck Protection Program. So it could then be eligible for loan forgiveness. As we've gotten questions, we've already heard that some of these loan turnaround times have been extended. I expect that there's going to be high subscription to this, a lot of interest just based on the economic conditions right now. But this is certainly something for small businesses that is a huge influx of cash, and especially that loan forgiveness element is going to be key. And again, part of this has to do with the covered period for the loan goes back to February 15th. So I found that interesting because basically Congress is already admitting that they're 6 weeks late to this. It's going back to what your employment looked like, your employee count looked like it on February 15th, and projecting forward that number. Your loan forgiveness does get reduced if your employee count decreases over that time. So just know that. And again, we'll see specific regulations on this in the coming days. That's one key element for your businesses to certainly take advantage of in the short term. The next huge aspect to this bill is expanded unemployment benefits. So this is really the key for those folks that maybe already had to make the tough decision to furlough or lay off workers. There was a huge fight to expand access to unemployment, and quite frankly, the federal government is adding additional money to that. So you may have heard over the last couple of days some of the delays on the Senate side. There's an additional $600 per week that's going to be added to these unemployment benefits, and the feds are paying for all that, and it's being added through through the state unemployment trust funds. And that was something that was discussed as a possible disincentive to work. There was an amendment vote, it failed, bill moved, so that carried. And that's about $250+ billion investment the federal government's making in unemployment. Also important for this industry, I'm sure, is the expansion to include the self-employed, gig workers and part-time workers. So those types of folks that you had on your payroll will now be eligible for unemployment insurance if they need it moving forward. So that was another key aspect. There's several other elements to that that we could go into in more detail, probably at a different time. But that's really the headline there. And then looking out at some of the business tax provisions that I think were really critical for small and large companies. One being that was inserted into the last version of the Senate bill we saw. It's called and again, you'll see the incentive, the employee retention tax credit. This is something that you have to make a choice as a business, whether you want to do this SBA Paycheck Protection Program or take advantage of this tax credit. Basically, what it allows small businesses to do under 100 employees is take a 50% credit on employee wages up to $10,000 if your business was paused or affected by the coronavirus issue. So knowing that, looking out and looking at the different states and localities under whether it's shelter in place, essential businesses closed, these types of elements, all those things really are going to trigger that provision. But again, it's a question of, can you wait to take that credit when you file your taxes, or would you rather get the capital influx from the SBA loan program? So that's one new credit that was created here. One thing we heard about leading up to this discussion was a payroll tax delay. That was something that initially was met with kind of frosty glasses on the Hill. However, it was included. So this is an immediate payroll tax delay for all businesses that pay taxes that will then actually it's not completely forgiven. It's repaid in equal installments over the next 2 years. So 2021, 2022. But right now, it allows you to delay that payroll tax. Another key element that for HFA has been a huge, one of our top congressional priorities is the Qualified Improvement Property, QIP, QIP, technical correction. That's been something that we've been pushing for as an association. I'm thinking back to May 2019 on a big industry fly-in we had, and just peppering members and staff with questions. That finally got done. What that does require a little bit of effort here. What it does is it allows for bonus depreciation as well as an accelerated write-down schedule for any improvements you've done to your physical stores. That's something that you could take advantage of through an amended tax return with the IRS, and that would allow you to get a refund based on overpaid taxes. So that's another element that will allow you to get cash back into your business, assuming you've already made those improvements, but then prospectively looking at if you are making those improvements, you now have more of an incentive to do so.
Hey, Chris, real quick
yes.
clarification on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in those improvements you're talking about, that quick fix is now retroactive to 2018, correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So retroactive to it was something that was passed in the 2017 tax law, that there was a drafting error. Congressional intent was one thing, it was interpreted another, and we've explored many avenues as folks on this call and Doug and Mark know well, whether it's regulation, guidance from the administration, congressional effect. Now that's been done. So yeah, to your point, Mark, you would have to go back to amend your 2018 return because you've already filed that to take advantage of that retroactively.
Thank you.
So yeah. And then looking ahead to in terms of employees, there were several to the extent that your employees have student loan payments and those types of things due. I know that this can be a stressful time for everybody, so that there is a federal deferment now of those loan payments for the next 6 months, interest and principal together, and there won't be any accrual over that time. The feds have also ceased garnishing wages or Social Security or any tax refunds on folks that are perhaps in default. So they've done that. And then moving on. So that's some of the other personal provisions. There's a lot of, as you can imagine, healthcare type provisions in here, whether it's paying for research and vaccines, upskilling and getting the healthcare workforce ready for what's here now and what's to come. The next key business element is for larger employers. So those folks that aren't under 500 employees, looking at it's an economic stabilization fund. It was created at the Department of Treasury. That's where you heard a lot about the direct financing for airlines. So it's a $500 billion fund. 58 billion goes to the commercial and cargo airline sector. So that's carved out for them. Then there's a $17 billion carve out for industries that impact national security. And then there's another 425 billion in that fund for other companies, right? And these are companies between 500 and 10,000 employees. Again, I think one of the key differentiators between this Department of Treasury account and the small business account is that small business has loan forgiveness, Department of Treasury does not. So this is actually a loan that will need to be paid back, and there are additional strings attached to that related to prohibitions on share buybacks, executive compensation, as well as one of the things that the Democrats worked to get in at near the end was more oversight and transparency. So there will be a regular report. My understanding will be quarterly, but it could happen more frequently. Report to Congress about which companies are taking these loans, what the terms are, and that sort of information. So there's going to be some more transparency in terms of what those loans are, and the reason is because these are loans that are being guaranteed and underwritten by the federal government itself. On the SBA side, the SBA is the guarantor, but actually the lender, the private banks are the lenders, and so that's already well established. And that's where, so when you add all that up, we're talking 350 plus for SBA, certainly near 300 billion, if not more, for unemployment insurance. You've got 500 billion in the Department of Treasury, all those tax breaks we talked about, and then there's another significant, what they call a supplemental appropriations bill that provides funding to the federal agencies to combat this. And so wrap that all up, over the course of a week, and Congress spends $2.2 trillion. It's interesting because we did a webinar similar to this about a week ago, and I think in my slide deck, looking back, I said, oh, well, the price tag's going up by the day, and at that point it was about 1 trillion. And so here we are at 2 trillion. And then we're already talking, I know the staff is already working, quite frankly, on a fourth package, because I wish that I knew, and Mark, which we all could tell you when we're going to hit the bottom here in terms of when we're going to turn the corner. The truth is, folks in the government, folks in Congress, they don't know. So I think that there's going to be a realization quickly, if it isn't already there, that there's going to be more help needed. So to the extent that with all these key elements, if there's something more that folks need, I think we're all resources to help try and get that done as we continue to work on these issues, in the short and intermediate terms. So Mark, that's kind of an overview.
And so you do feel, for those out there that their issues with their businesses have not been answered by this bill, you're saying there's still, as you take the temperature there's still a willingness to think about filling some of the potential gaps that are there?
Absolutely. Now that doesn't come with that does not come with potential risks, right? Because one of the things that I would say is in the second package, and I know it's something that's impacting a lot of folks on the webinar today, Congress mandated 14-day paid sick and family leave policies for employers less than 500 employees, right? The Democrats, of course, were pushing to make that a permanent policy position, permanent. There was a negotiation that provision right now actually sunsets at the end of this year, right? So that's a short term. And then, of course, there was a 100% refundable tax credit joined with that, so that as an employer providing that benefit, the federal government will be actually paying for that for the next, whatever it is, 9 months. And then one of the other things I forgot to mention, Mark, in this new bill is the point that we were making as small businesses primarily to Congress was, well, that's nice. However, you're expecting a small business to float that paid sick leave proposal until the time that they pay their taxes, whether that's monthly, quarterly, and whatever it is. So in this third package, that refundable tax credit has actually been converted to an advanced credit. So you're able to take money out on the front end to help offset those paid and sick and family leave provisions. So I think that was a good pivot, but that's certainly what we've heard in terms of elements of a fourth package, Mark. I think that, the small business piece is going to be key. I mean, quite frankly, I believe that there's going to have to be more money. This question of eligibility, I think that there's going to be several other industries who are going to be asking for a similar shake that the hotel and restaurants got. Because look, the reality is, I was just talking to staff about it 30 minutes before this call, which is the precedent's there. So Congress has set the precedent, and so now it may be incumbent upon us to look to expand that to other industries that are hurting. But we've heard on the benefit side of things that there will be another push in the House to make that paid sick and family leave provision permanent. We'll have to see how that ends up playing out, but that's going to be a pretty significant negotiation. I think everybody can understand at a state and local level, there's going to have to be more money provided to the states. I mean, these states are going to get hammered. I do a lot of work on the workforce development side with several states, so I was getting some of these insights into the UI claims over the last week, but it was still staggering to see that $3.3 million or 3.3 million figure released by the Department of Labor yesterday. That's a lot of lost. I mean, at last tax, that's a lot of lost tax revenues to these local areas and states. So there's obviously going to have to be more done. Like I said, folks have now adjourned and recessed for a little while. There is some concern about spreading the virus amongst themselves here. But once they come back, I think that there is a recognition that there's going to need to be something else, because this is a good step. It will provide a lot of relief to employers and employees alike. However, there's going to have to be more. So that's now, I mean, I don't know if it's crass to say, but that's kind of now where Washington is focused itself, right? Is what's this next package look like?
Gotcha. Doug, you have some questions that are coming in?
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions, and one thing to just say as well. And Furniture Today actually asked us for a comment about this bill a couple of days ago, and Jesus Capo, our president, and Sharon Bradley, our CEO, they did that, and they highlighted all the things that Chris has been talking about. But they also, expressed gratitude that there's so much help coming for our hospitals and for our local health departments and state health departments, and for our medical responders. And we want to make sure that as an association we say that as well, because we really depend on heroic medical responders in our communities to deal with this crisis. But Chris, not surprisingly, we're getting an awful lot of questions about the Small Business Administration loans. So I'm just going to kind of pepper you with some. So let's just go back to the basic on this. So what are the stipulations for loan forgiveness?
Yes, there are 4 stipulations for loan forgiveness, just breaking it down, where there are 4 elements that can be forgivable, okay? That is payroll costs. So the extent that you're getting a loan through this Paycheck Protection Program, the pieces that can be forgivable are payroll costs, and that includes wages, healthcare, it's an expansive list, as Doug knows. So it's payroll costs, it is mortgage interest payments, rent payments, and or utility payments. And there's an extensive list of eligible utilities. So that's not to say that if you get one of these loans that you can't spend the money on other things. However, in order for that, the part of that loan that you're taking out to be forgivable, they have to be used on those elements. And then as we talked about in terms of what does forgiveness look like, it goes back to your payroll and your employee counts over the covered period. So as you go back to February 15th, what did your employment look like? And then on a monthly basis, like we say, okay, what did your employment look like here? What did it look like here? And then your loan forgiveness is reduced accordingly if your employment count is reduced over that period of time as well. But it's those 4 factors: payroll costs, mortgage interest, rent payments, utility payments. Those are all forgivable potentially under this program.
Okay, so let's just say that you've already furloughed or laid off some employees, and you want to call them back to put them back on your payroll, but because they're getting such generous unemployment benefits, some of them are going to say, no thanks, we're going to stay where we are. How does that affect your payroll? And are we talking about number of employees, or are we talking about total dollars payroll?
So we're talking about number of employees for sure. And then I think, to your point, Doug, that's part of the issue with these unemployment benefits. That was one of the concerns raised, was does it create a disincentive to go back to work? Look, nobody knows your employees better than you will as their employer, as their but to your point, in order to, you could use these funds if you've already made the difficult decision to furlough or lay people off. You could use these funds to then hire them back, and then those funds would be forgiven. It would essentially be a loan that allows you to hire those folks back, but then you could take it as a grant. But I'm certainly not discounting that potential situation, because that's something that you would have to, I think, take into account as you're going through with this process. I mean, I would bet that, I'm just an optimist that folks would want to then come back and take that employment for when we come out of this, because that was a job that they were in beforehand. So there are any number of factors, quite honestly, that Congress didn't, and I would say maybe shouldn't, try to legislate here. But that's one of those scenarios that I've been hearing over the last several days for sure. But just know that, again, part of the incentive that for that forgiveness aspect is so that you could then use that money to hire those people back, and that would be money that the government essentially just gives to you.
Can I ask a clarification there, Chris, for 1 second?
Yes.
Because, and I know there's so much to read on this bill, but when it talked about, for a lot of these loans, the fact that the funds had to be used to retain 90% of your business workforce.
Right.
It seems like these two things are playing against each other to a certain degree, with what Doug's talking about with that question, which is we're enriching the unemployment benefits quite significantly.
Right.
Does seem like that's a little bit of a push-pull to me. Are those two things mutually exclusive, or how do those two things interact?
There is an interaction there. I would say that to your point on the 90% of the workforce, Mark, that is an element that's part of the Department of Treasury loan. But you're right. I mean, essentially, the retention aspect of your employment base is what Congress and the administration is trying to preserve here. So there's different factors in Treasury and SBA, but like you said, at the same time, we've also enriched at the federal government's expense these unemployment benefits. I think some of that comes down to what does the recovery look like, right, for the country. And certainly when you look at our industry, we talked about those direct rebate checks to folks. Some of these other people that have applied for unemployment insurance may not know if they're going to get another job. Some of the folks that I've talked to in this industry, a lot of the times they're communicating really well with their employees. They're saying, hey, look, I'm trying to do this. I'm going to ask, we're planning to April 1st and then beyond. I don't know. Keeping that, I've been actually heartened to hear that, sort of that communication. There's a lot of folks that probably don't enjoy that same benefit, but you're right. I mean, there's certainly a conflict there, right? But that was something that ultimately Congress, look, we don't want to say they turned a blind eye, but they decided to fight that a different day, right? And they wanted to get money to folks, and just in case something were to happen, they weren't able to find employment quickly. But and that just one of those aspects to this that I think that many of us, on the personal and the business side, will be wrestling with in the coming weeks, what that looks like.
Right. So the Small Business Administration loans are actually made by banks, and they're backed by the SBA. Mm-hmm. So can a business deal just directly with the bank and not go through the SBA application process?
So, well, yes. I mean, there are, you can obviously, as businesses, there are many ways to get credit, right? This is as Doug mentioned, there's an existing, SBA already has loan authority existing, so they've got hundreds of lenders already. Many of your banks may already be, and like I said, some folks may already have SBA loans. The key element to this, of course, is the forgiveness aspect, right? I don't know of any bank right now that's willing to just give you money without anything in return. So that's one thing that having the SBA involved does provide that benefit.
Well, I think we're just talking about the application process. Can you just short circuit the application? Because we have another question that says, hey, I can't get through on the website. Can I fax in my application? Can I send it by mail? So there's, I think you mentioned earlier, there's a bottleneck.
There's a bottleneck. I think Congress obviously recognized that. They gave the SBA, aside from these direct loan and grant funds, they gave them money to actually administer this program and get those systems up to date. But yes, you're right. That's why when I heard the secretary say, oh, this is going to be up, and he said lending, he said up and lending by next week, I was thinking, all right, from your lips to God's ears. But yes, we're already seeing that. You can go down to your bank, whatever it is, and I'm not Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and talk to somebody in person to do that now. And like I said, you can start the process knowing that this new program doesn't exist quite yet. I don't know the president. I don't know if he signed the bill yet. I'm not watching to see if he signed the bill yet. But any other SBA loan that you apply for right now can then be refinanced into this Paycheck Protection Program and then be eligible for the loan forgiveness.
Yeah. So a related question. So a lot of businesses have already been using their credit lines to take care of business expenses, just to pay their bills, and this is affecting their credit ratings, their debt to income ratios, and so on. I mean, it's already tough.
Right. Sure.
So should they still apply for one of these SBA loans that could help them, for example, with their mortgage costs?
I mean, look, I would say yes, because if you're talking about mortgage costs, that is something that is forgivable. So to the extent that many of you are already extending yourselves with your reserves, with your available credit, whatever those means are, this would be one of those areas. I think there's a recognition within Congress and the administration that is what's happening, right? I mean, especially in our business, if people aren't allowed to go out of their house, they can't go to the furniture store, and then there's a whole nother question about making deliveries and whether your store's even open. So you're not having any money come in, but these SBA funds could then come in to help. I'll use the phrase "stop the bleeding." I'll use it lightly, of course, but that could be something you could use those funds. Again, like you said, Doug, some of those, depending on the cost, depending on what you're using them for, it would then be forgivable. So it'd be money from the government to help you perhaps stop the flush of those reserves and then perhaps build those back up.
Okay, in connection with the payroll protection program, when calculating an average monthly payroll, do we count employees? Can we count employees paid over $100,000? Can we reduce those employees, reduce their compensation to less than $100,000, and then participate in the payroll protection program?
So there's a couple of different questions in there, but yes, there is a restriction within the SBA program that the eligible payroll costs do not apply to an employee making, or to not but any employee making over $100,000 in a calendar year. Okay, so to your point, I mean, that would be a question between the employee and the employer in terms of reducing that compensation below that $100,000 threshold, but that's something that is included in the language in the legislation, is that $100,000 threshold in terms of eligible costs to be forgiven, right? It's not that you couldn't use the money to pay those costs, but those that would not be part of the loan forgiveness piece.
Okay. A business has already applied for the SBA disaster relief loan.
Mm-hmm.
Can this be rolled over into a payroll protection program loan, or will it be automatically?
Again, two questions. Can it be? Yes. Will it be automatically? I don't think so. Again, I would stay in touch with the folks, whether it was through SBA or through your private lender, your bank, when you made that application, to let them know that, hey, I'm filing this application now, but my desire is to then roll this over into a payroll protection program loan, and that is allowed. That's expressly given that authority in the statute of the legislation. I assume, which is always trouble, especially in DC, I assume that there's going to be some additional clarity given to that through the regulatory process as those start to come out in the coming days.
Chris, I have a question that I'm curious about. We have in the association, we have members that are small all the way up to very large, and so we know that 500 employee threshold is critical. And you mentioned that for the 500 and above, it's going to be something that's going to be a fight, I guess, for a different day. But
yes.
when does that number? When was that number arrived at? Is that first of the year? Because we actually had an interesting question that there are some businesses that are now below 500 based
right.
upon this crisis. And I mean, I understand. I mean, I know we're trying to look for any angle here, but was this as of January 1st that you judge that 500 above or below?
So the covered period for this loan starts at February 15th. So I would at a baseline go back to that date and look at your employee counts to see whether you would then be eligible. That would be my advice there. I mean, that's an interesting question. There's a couple of aspects to that, Mark, that I just will highlight since we brought it up. I said 500 employees is the hard number. There's a couple of interesting pieces to that, because there's 500 employees, and then there's also a clause in there that says, well, or unless the SBA has developed their own standards for the respective industry. So I looked it up for furniture retailers just on a whim. They actually don't have a employee size standard for furniture retailers. They do have a revenue standard though. The revenue standard is under $15 million. Now, that has nothing, quite honestly, I don't know if I should have said that or not on this webinar because I don't want to confuse people, but that is not a factor here. I just wanted folks to know you've got the 500 employees. There are other size standards that the SBA has that do apply. However, there is not one for this industry. And then, as I mentioned, there are additional carve-outs for eligibility. One being 501c3s, which typically are not eligible for the SBA, any SBA loan. They are eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. And then those hotel and restaurants with a certain NAICS code do with more than one location, but under 500 employees per at any location do apply here. So that's those are some of the caveats to that.
Also, I guess I would ask you too, are there any have there been any significant changes in the final version of this bill that give any more clarity to what an essential business is that could benefit our members?
So in this particular bill, no, because that guidance has been issued directly, so you don't have to go through the legislative process, which is kind of a benefit in of itself, through a division of Homeland Security. It's the Cyber Infrastructure Security Administration, CISA. I had circulated around to Doug and others an expected update to that essential business guidance that I had been told was going to be posted today. I didn't check before, as of like 2:30 or 3 o'clock. I don't think that had been officially posted, but there were, and we would be able to provide direct feedback to that agency on, some of the stories we were hearing from our members. We had heard, and I picked out a couple of other bullets related to delivery that I thought was really important for our members. Certainly appliances, I know, has been something we've talked about for the last couple of weeks. That seemed to be memorialized in this updated guidance. So in this particular bill, no. However, through some additional federal guidance, we're expecting that to be updated to provide a little bit more clarity to the HFA membership. And I would say that document, again, was updated twice in 1 week. So it could be updated again to the extent that folks are looking for any sort of changes, or you have some suggestions. We're happy to pass those along. And I would say too, the other tricky thing is, and we've talked to, I've flagged this for the National Governors Association, is that some states are basing their essential worker and business guidance on the feds, which is rational. Other states are making their own decisions, making their own definitions. And so what we're seeing is, some states stick to that federal guidance solely. Others use it as kind of a baseline and then, add or subtract. So unfortunately, it really kind of depends which state you're in and what guidance they're leaning on. But the feds are updating the guidance. And I know from an industry standpoint, we've been telling the governors as much uniformity as possible, because again, we're making all these hard decisions in a crazy environment. That's one less confusing item that we'd like to take off our list.
There's far from uniformity on this. And, when I've found some states such as Indiana, Wisconsin are just a couple that seem to be very lenient. I generally advise our members to check their local governments, which that's the first line of enforcement on these things. Explain your circumstances, explain the products that you sell, explain some of the care that you can take, whether you're going to just allow pickup or whether you're going to deliver at front door delivery, garage delivery, all those kinds of things. And, and a lot of our members are hearing from their local governments that, yeah, that's okay. But just, maybe you want to limit your store hours, maybe you want to, take extra precautions. So, just as the first go-to, call your city manager's office or city attorney's office. So can we add paid sick leave and family and medical leave to our payroll costs for loan purposes?
Yes. I'll leave that one at that. And it's specifically called out.
Okay. Businesses with fewer than 50 employees, are they exempt from these Family and Medical Leave Act requirements and paid sick leave requirements?
So the Secretary of Labor has the discretion to exempt them. I know that that's been the expectation. I have not seen specific guidance on that yet from the Department of Labor, but the expectation has been that that he would, in this case, he would issue regulation to exempt those employees under 50. I think that there were in the bill that was signed, so that was, I think, March 18th, that bill was signed.
Yes.
the expectation is there's like a 15-day period, right, to issue those regulations. And my understanding is, so it'll be sometime early next week that those will be coming out. But that's the expectation, is that those businesses under 50 would be exempted.
Yeah,
All
good
right.
question here too. This is an important one, asking if can a business ask for reimbursement of payroll, utilities, rent, et cetera, prior to when they get the loan? Meaning, does the clock only start once they get the loan processed, or does it start from a certain point prior?
It goes back to February 15th. That's that key date as a covered period of the loan. It really goes back to February 15th. So I would, again, I'm hoping for more clarity through the regulatory process, but my read of the statute would say that anything before February 15th would likely not be eligible, but anything after would be.
So if it goes back to February 15th, then does that mean that the 8-week forgiveness window starts February 15th, or when the loan is
Well, I think that, as a business owner, you can make that request of when this loan is, if you want to claw back to February 15th, if you're one of these early states that was impacted really hard, or maybe you haven't seen the impacts as hard yet, and it was wanted to be March 15th, but you have the ability to go back. And then, again, importantly, that's an important decision for you, because that starts the clock on that 8-week payroll cost limit, right? And so I'll just wanted to say that too, in terms of the loan forgiveness aspect, that's for up to 8 weeks. So if you went back to February 15th, that would then, again, that would set that end date 8 weeks from then.
That question came from Washington State, not surprisingly. I'm sorry.
Okay, exactly. Yeah, so
Gotcha.
that's.
Yeah. Doug?
All right. A strategic question, again, not knowing how long this is going to go on. Does it make sense to begin a loan application now? I mean, yeah, absolutely, because it's going to take weeks to process.
Right. I mean, I only have a 2-story house, but if I sit on the roof, that's what I'd be saying. Start the process now, because it takes a little bit of time. As you mentioned, Doug, we're hearing already from folks that there's a bottleneck. Again, I'm expecting, hoping, assuming, praying that there's going to be an acceleration here based on what the Secretary and the administration will be pushing out. And then the other thing too is, like we said, any of these loan applications you make now can be refinanced or converted to the Paycheck Protection Program along the way. So that's allowed.
And, again, another thing that I tell our members is call your congressional office, call your congressman's office, and just, briefly explain your circumstances. Say you're applying, ask if they can help to accelerate that process, to give it a push. Maybe they can, maybe they can't, but it doesn't hurt to make that connection.
That's what they're there for.
Yeah, that's what they're there for. None of them say no.
Right.
They'll tell you they'll try, and it's good to have that connection.
Well, Doug, that's a great point, because really and truly, those businesses that are not part of that carve out or have these other frustrations right now, they need to start this. You're doing a great job for us, Chris, but you're one person. They need to be ramping this up like now. Recess has begun for the Senate and the House, but still, wouldn't you say get on it, and get on it hard and right now?
Absolutely. Look, the reality is, as I was just talking, we were talking to some folks right before this call. I mean, they're on it. Like this is every member of Congress's first priority, and making sure that people are employed, no matter what political party you come to, that's your first priority. And so being responsive to businesses, I mean, Doug and I have hooked specific members up with this sort of thing, just to say, hey, contact your senator's office, we'll make the introduction, get you connected to the right person who can then make an inquiry. And again, they can then report back information that they're hearing, and they can get a peek behind the curtain in terms of what else can be done. And they're very sensitive right now to what you are going through, and to the extent that you can share that story. I mean, we've shared several member stories over the course of the last several weeks, and they're very impactful, and then B, I think they're really helpful, especially as we set the stage for phase 4 of this recovery package, which says, hey, look, this is what we've been telling you. Our members, our industry is we're trying to do right by our employees, by our companies, which in many cases have been in our families for a long time. We're trying to do the right thing. We've been hit, by this crisis, and appreciate the opportunity for the government to come provide some help. But this is something else that we need. So continuing that dialogue right now is critical. I mean, on a staff level, Mark, I mean, it's interesting because the members are gone. The staff can now really kind of dig in. We've got some more attention now. It's a little, I'll admit, it's strange because most folks are working from home, just like all of us. But that doesn't mean that I haven't been on Zoom calls, conference calls, whatever, email chains with all kinds of different staff at a variety of levels and all kinds of different offices. So this is the #1 priority, bar none. But I think it's imperative for all of us to keep that conversation going, knowing that there may be another opportunity to get some more help. That's likely.
Somebody, one of our members on the call applied and received an SBA loan back in 2008 when everything was crashing. And it was loaded with monthly fees that actually made it more expensive than an ordinary loan they could have gotten. Is that the case this time?
Many of those fees have, as you would expect in this program, been waived. Basically, what it says is the SBA is going to pay those fees to the lender. So typically, again, in a different situation, it would charge the lendee for that. But in this case, the government is actually paying for those. So those fees are going to be dramatically, I don't want to say zero, but they're going to be dramatically reduced.
All right, so with the SBA loan, you're using it for payroll, for mortgage, all the right things. Is there a separate application for loan forgiveness?
No, that's going to be baked in, and again, that's done through the lender, and the what would happen is that basically the SBA would come in and pay that forgivable part of the loan to the lender, so you wouldn't again be on the hook for it. That's the way, again, as I understand it, we'll get some more guidance, I'm sure. That's the way I understand it right now, just talking to folks on the Small Business Committee who wrote these provisions.
Okay, in all of these programs, are your sales associates who are paid on commission only treated any differently? And the second question is, what about independent sales reps? How are they treated?
They're all sort of lumped in to the same, they're all part of the eligible payroll cost equation. So commissions are certainly factored in there, 1099 employees, all those considerations are kind of laid out in the payroll costs. So that's something as you would walk through the application would be enumerated, and that's where you would fill it out. And again, you're estimating what that piece of the loan would be.
So your employees who can't come to work because nobody's allowed to leave their homes in their community, and they go on unemployment, are they still eligible for this $1,200 a person? And are they eligible for health benefits? And that would be the paid sick leave benefit.
Can I phone a friend? The Eric's from this morning. No, I would say yes. They are still eligible for the rebate check. Okay, they are still eligible for the rebate check even if they're on unemployment. As far as the eligibility under sick leave, I mean, we had this conversation this morning. I remember it vividly because I had the same question, which is, part of the paid sick leave aspect talks about being under, some sort of a quarantine order from a federal, state, or local government. If you're told to shelter in place, that's not spelled as quarantine, but that's effectively what it acts as. So there are two schools of thought to that. However, if you as an employer elect a sick leave, that triggers that refundable tax credit. So the federal government would be paying for that up to 14 days, assuming you're under 500 employees and not under 50 and exempted. So again, a lot of different moving parts here. But then And then also you could have those costs covered under your SBA loan as well.
Okay, how do you apply for the PPP, payroll protection program?
Well, no, that's the most difficult question, Doug. We don't have, I mean, right now, they don't have a process established. Like we said, I would say right now, get off this call and start the process. Apply to your bank today, because any application you put in for SBA loan today can be converted to a PPP. The honest answer is we don't know, right? We're waiting for these regulations. The secretary has said that his expectation is that this will be taking applications, stood up and making loans. He said the same day. I don't know if that's possible by the end of next week. But the reality is SBA has 15 days. I think it'll be a lot shorter, assuming the president has signed this.
He did. It's official.
Okay.
It's law.
It's official. It's law.
All
So
right.
that process is starting, and we'll get more guidance of that, I would think, early to mid next week moving forward.
Okay,
We
Chris,
have
you're doing
time
a
for
great
one last
job.
question, Doug.
Oh man, only one? Okay.
Yeah, I know.
If we lay off employees, do we have to hire back the same employees? Or can we hire other ones and still be eligible for some loan forgiveness?
You can hire other ones. It's really all about that employee count in terms of loan forgiveness and whether or not it's reduced. So.
Okay. All right. Now there were some questions.
That was quick.
Mark.
You have time for another one.
Yeah. All right. Well, there was a question about the unemployment benefits and whether there's a sliding scale for that. But no, that's everybody gets the same $600 plus whatever their state benefit would be.
Right.
There were questions about the availability of this webinar, and yes, it will be available. It is being recorded, and it will be available. No, it won't be posted on YouTube as far as I know, but maybe we can look into that.
And really, anybody who has signed up for the webinar, you'll get that link. But just know that anybody that could not be on this call to be a part of it, it will be going up on myhfa.org/COVID-19, or just go to myhfa.org. There's an easy, quick click there. And I think, gentlemen, I think that it's pretty clear. We would have loved to have ended this hour with all the questions answered and clarity for all. However, we know that's not the case, but it's a great start. The questions we did not get to, we are going to be putting up as FAQs on our website. And this is really, I think, the first of what's going to be a number of these webinars, because the one thread through this whole thing is implementation, while great promises, is the question mark. All of the questions we've asked have had that tinge in it about how do I access it? How do I, what's going to happen? So implementation is going to be the, somewhat of the bumpy, uneven road ahead. So we're going to be on that, I think, as well for everybody. Chris, any last final words before we let everybody go?
What a week. I just appreciate the engagement from HFA, from Mark and Doug, and then obviously from the members. Just know that we're working to the bone to try and get this right for you. We understand that you guys have made tough decisions. You're making those decisions, and I know that Doug, we've made ourselves available. So if you have other questions that come up that aren't on the FAQs that Mark mentioned, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, appreciate you saying that, because we're in the midst of our 100th year, and we were founded to bring retailers together, and for times just like this is that moment. And I think the message as we leave you all tonight is that we at least have a new law. We've got something to dig in on, but more things that need to get done. And just know that we collectively in the association are here for you, and that all of us together can do great things for this industry, even in the worst crisis that we've all seen. Chris Andresen, thank you so much. Doug Clark, thank you so much. I'm Mark Schumacher. We want you all to stay well and let us know whatever we can do to support you here at HFA. Thank you for joining us.